If you don't have your faces in some time. We are here, the Equity Advisory Group meeting. We want to start, and I'll acknowledge that we are here one day post Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and hope folks did something restorative for themselves yesterday. Context of this year's Martin Luther King Jr. Day, especially. So hopefully folks did stuff for something restorative for themselves, or for their community, or both. And we also are coming up, speaking of New Year's, I suppose, on the 29th is Lunar New Year. So that's also something to look forward to. I have to remind myself about that, actually. And I know that in March, my friend and their family celebrates Nowruz, and sort of New Year, sort of Persian New Year. So there are actually multiple opportunities. If you need to feel like you need a restart and you didn't get on January 1st, there's some more opportunities. So I want to start with that. But yeah, we're looking forward to today's meeting. We're going to spend some time here doing sort of a year in review and sort of look ahead to 2025. And so excited to hear a little bit of coverage, what was accomplished by this group, what sort of where is PSE as it sort of comes out of the end of 2024, and what are we looking ahead to the new year, and then talking a little bit about sort of engagement and sort of more in a scale of sort of transformative engagement opportunities or mechanisms, and hearing about an example from Ray and Virginia on the DR empowerment pilot. So that's our focus for today. I will invite Lysa to do our safety moment. And then I think after that, I'm inviting Jenny to open us up with an equity moment. But Lysa, are you good to go to cover from here?
Yes, for the safety moment, yes. So EAG, good to see you guys again. So I wanted to share a real life scenario for our safety moment this month, dealing with electrical safety, as well as down poles. So recently, while a PSE crew was attempting to clear a broken pole off the road, that pole, the energy in the pole was released, unfortunately, and it struck the employee to the ground. The employee was transferred to the hospital, but they are okay. Just wanted to emphasize, if you guys come across something like that, do not move anything, especially a down post. You never know what it's connected to, but also just emphasizing how challenging it can be to predict where energy is in a situation like that. So again, if you guys come across anything like that, just do not touch. And I will give it back to Ishmael.
Thanks, Lysa. I appreciate you starting earlier with the person is okay, because I know when you did a run through of this, we got through this, and then you're like, oh, by the way, they're okay. And I was like, oh, goodness. So yes, a very real and important safety moment. Thank you, Lysa. I'm glad to hear that staff person is okay. Okay. In continuation of our sort of opening grounding moments, I'm excited to see and hear from Jenny for this month's equity moment, and also because there is so much connection to the back half of today's meeting and talking about engagement and equitable communication. So Jenny, I will toggle through your slides here as you'd like me to.
Thank you. I think I only have one slide, probably. So you can go ahead and pop that up. There you go. But I have a lot of talking to do with this one slide. So bear with me. As we all know, words absolutely have power. Visual representation has power, and communications obviously is a powerful tool that can either be very, foster inclusion or create exclusion. And so it's really important to identify the most accessible, respectful, and culturally appropriate ways to build and share information. And we want to make sure that as we're communicating, we're promoting understanding and connection. And everything that I say, I might give an example or a general kind of principle, recommended principle for oral and written communication or visual. Oh, wait, I can see I made a typo. Anyway, we'll get there. I'll call it out when we get there. But when we're talking about oral, written, or visual communication, I will give examples, but always with the caveat that, you know, people will consider themselves a part of the same group or community, and then they also may prefer to or refer to themselves in varying ways. And so we always want to make sure that we're consulting with the people or groups that we're communicating with to determine the best approach. So that's the bottom line rule with everything that I say, just keeping that in mind. So going through oral and written communication, it is important to use person first or identity first language. And so this is used to emphasize that people, you know, have a condition or are experiencing a circumstance versus being the condition or circumstance. An example is one we all know, I believe, you know, instead of using homelessness, maybe we say people experiencing houselessness. And identity first language would be something, you know, people who use something to describe people who consider a condition as a part of their identity. So an example is many people would prefer to be, you know, prefer to use the term deaf people or a deaf person versus people with hearing loss. Again, these are general examples. We always want to, you know, work directly with the people we are communicating with on these things. Second principle, be specific, avoid generic terms when referring to groups. So when we're, you know, when we're talking about minority or minorities, and we want to, like, that's very general, right? So what does that mean? You know, use people in a specific set of circumstances. So more of like a demographic group. So instead of a general term, an example would be instead of a general term like at-risk household, which could mean many, many things, specify the risk and say something like members of households facing economic insecurity. And that's just a little more clear and specific. Be consistent, apply descriptors to all groups or none. So an example of this, which I really liked this example, you know, when you're comparing parents with parents of color, that could be interpreted as suggesting that parents of one group and parents of color are a second group, right? Parents of one group are white and parents of color are a second group. And that kind of reinforces like a stereotype that the standard is a white parent and then, you know, others are parents of color, right? So we want to make sure everyone is equal. And or we just don't, you know, we just keep it super broad, right? Okay, I hope that makes sense. I'm sorry. I'm trying to be quick too. I know this is supposed to be a minute, but we're way past that. Okay, use inclusive language. So focus on positives, avoid highlighting deficiencies. Generally, terms that start with non suggest that the group referred to is deficient. So rather than using like the term non-voter, maybe these individuals did vote in a past election, and maybe they had a temporary status that did not allow them to vote in a specific election. So maybe they were, you know, so instead of saying non-voter, it's just, you know, maybe something like a temporary status that didn't allow them to vote in that specific situation. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to vote in the future. Acknowledge intersectionality. So aspects of identity, such as race, gender, religion, all interact dynamically to shape individuals' self-definition, as well as their experiences, opportunities, or barriers. An example is when describing like participants in terms of their race and gender. A complete description or a more complete description would be participants included 20 Black women, 15 white women, 23 Black men, and 18 white men. Rather than 35 participants were women, 41 were men, 43 were Black, and 33 were white. So it's just kind of further defining each person or each group of people within that group that we're communicating with. Use nonviolent language. Okay, this is one I have been going nonstop with events recently, so I can't wait to dive deeper into this because this one was a brow raiser for me. So avoid terms like target, combat, or stakeholder. Stakeholder, I think we all have used that term even in this meeting, and I'm sorry, I had never previously heard that that term has historical roots in colonization. And so I cannot wait to really dive deeper. I mean, I understand it just by that description alone, but I can't wait to learn more about that myself because, I'm working with so many clients that, fundraising and all of this, and that's just such a common word that people use. And so and same with target, okay, what kind of goals are you going to, what are your target goals? What's your target audience? So these types of terms could have a violent connotation and could, could actually, affect someone in a negative way. And so we just need to be sensitive of those types of terms. So better, terms would be informers, advisors, consultants, collaborators, or co-owners. I just love that one. That's like my own learning moment that I'm sharing with you too. Show respect. Adopt language people use to describe themselves. The most common, I have other examples here, but the most common for me would be, my name is Jenny. I use she, her pronouns, and, that's what I would prefer to be called, just like the next person and whatever their pronouns are, so we need to respect and adopt the language that each person uses to identify themselves. Same things. Another one would be like older adults is a preferred term versus senior citizens or the elderly. We need to allow flexibility. So this would be something like if we're surveying a group of people, allowing enough room for people to identify with more than one race or ethnicity. That might have just got kind of shot down out the window yesterday a little bit, unfortunately, in some aspects. But I think whatever we can do to continue to be really inclusive in, if we need to collect that demographic information, allowing the most flexibility in what people can select and how they can identify themselves. I know for my son, I have two boys who are half Black, half white, and my younger son is very, very light skinned, and he always would tell me he had a really hard time when he was only allowed to check one box. And he would always check Black, and some people would look at him funny or even say stuff to him. But that's how he identified. That's just how he identified, but it always made him feel really bad and really kind of out of place, so no one should ever feel like that when they're, providing demographics. Okay. And then here's the typo. I'm so sorry. So across the slide, it says principles for oral communication. Oral is actually supposed to be visual there. So I apologize for that. Sorry. So we just covered oral and written, and they're not exclusive principles. There's so many more rules. I just kind of had to pare things down a little bit. But in terms of visual communication, it's really important that we always show a diverse representation and use visuals that reflect, diverse racial and ethnic groups, as well as a variety of family structures and compositions. always use a balanced approach. So we don't have to have the same amount of diversity shown in each visual. Say you're giving a presentation and it's 12 pages. Not every page has to have the same amount of, one thing, right? To keep it inclusive. Just ensure that there's a balanced representation throughout the 12 pages, or the video or whatever it is. Use realistic features and depict individuals authentically. So that means, representing people in varied shapes, sizes, and appearance. And you can show this diversity, ideally, informed by the members, by members of the relevant population groups that, have those lived experiences. If that's who we're representing, that's who we're communicating with, that's how we want to reflect those visuals. And then also just to ensure we are using cultural sensitivity and being mindful and very limited in how and when we use things like cultural artifacts, products, symbols, things like that, and just keep them for when they have appropriate meaning for that specific communication. Okay, and yeah, I think that is it. So again, just remember, words have power. Communication can foster inclusion or create exclusion, and it's essential to identify the most accessible, respectful, and cultural appropriate ways to build and share information and to promote understanding and connection, and always check with the people we are communicating with. Hope that all made sense. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, no. Thank you, Jenny. That was great. Also, just for your sake, you were perfectly on time. The equity moment, we have up to 10 minutes, and we started to make that adjustment. So it's not something that we rush through. So you're right on time. I'll just share really quickly from just listening to you here. Yeah, when you talk about sort of words have power, it really, it's like, it's about your worldview. Like it informs the way you look at the world and the way you sort of navigate. And so you might find yourself feeling like you need to remind yourself to like use certain terminology, but the more you do that, you find yourself in another situation or context that has nothing to do with that, and you realize, oh, is this something that is this actually? And it can impact, I have found it for myself, it can impact like my relationship building, because I might say, let me actually walk that back. Is this like, what are you comfortable with, et cetera? And it helps to build more safety, solidarity, et cetera. So, yeah, I think there were some things that some folks sharing in the chat as well, that is highly relevant.
Yeah, I can summarize that if you'd like. You have a few people just talking more about like how this has come up in their lives, and oh yes, stakeholder, I've heard that now. And also just a lot of gratitude, Jenny, that people in their sphere are still inclusive and practicing and actively and overtly practicing respect for each other. And so I think the biggest point being that this practice is really a person to person learning experience. And so when you tell someone, oh, actually, this is what stakeholder means and the legacy of that word, gives them an opportunity to change behavior. And then when they change the way they talk about it, they then spread that message. And so that's just kind of the building of a general culture. And to Megan's point, it seems like that is a strong culture here. And so encouraging everyone to then kind of spread that to all other parts of your life, maybe. So yeah.
Awesome. And I sort of made this tee up earlier. The back half of today's meeting is going to be all about sort of like how we push the collective we, PSE, continue to push more equitable engagement, a little bit more transformative engagement. And so all these things, the way that we're interacting directly or indirectly when we're talking about other people, etc., is all part of that. So I will not be surprised if this is referenced multiple times today. So I appreciate you setting the tone that. Jenny said, no, we had time too. You know, I had time. I was writing notes and everything. So don't feel too gracious, but thank you. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much, Jenny. Yeah, like I said, I think we're going to be referencing this several times today, and we should all be mindful as we are using language, and this should be a space that we can help each other grow in this way. So with that, I will move us along. So I talked a little bit earlier about what we're doing in today's meeting. I'm going to turn the mic over here to, well, actually, I skipped ahead. Just as a reminder, we are in a shared space. We are a group that is trying to be productive together, but we bring a lot of individual perspectives. We want to hear the diversity of views and opinions. We want to invite active participation as always. If you're a person that is able to and is comfortable with verbal participation, coming off mute, using raise hand to come and join the conversation is good. Ariam will be watching the chat if that is where your comfortability and accessibility is. If there are if there are two conversations happening, we're going to try and make them one. So we might interject and intervene at that point in time. But if you're in there just being like, what does that acronym mean? Thank you. That's totally fine and acceptable. So, and we are trying to make sure that we are moving us appropriately and on time through today's conversation. And then, of course, we, as always, are live streaming this meeting on YouTube. We will invite people to identify themselves during the break if they are interested in public comment period. The public comment period will begin at 6:55, and we will provide more instructions about how to join the meeting. The first 5 individual, well, I guess that should be a little bit earlier, 6:50. First 5 individuals will have 2 minutes to speak. Okay. With that, I will turn the mic over to Troy. Troy will talk a little bit about, from PSC's perspective, 2024 year in review and 2025 look ahead. And then our team member, Andres Mantilla, will do a condense a version from our perspective as facilitators of groups like this one in other work and how we see the current moment. So Troy, I will toggle your slides as you ask me to.
All right. Good evening again. Welcome all of you, and I'll try to be brief. I'll assume that you've had a chance to review the slides, so I'm not going to read everything that's there, and encourage conversation as I proceed. Next slide. So a lot of what we do is grounded in sort of regulatory requirements. And so I want to make sure that we're acknowledging sort of that journey. I will say, Jenny, to your point about stakeholders, the commission staff, the staff that work at the regulators, have encouraged with all of their proceedings that we all move away from use of stakeholder, which, as you know, is a legal term that's included in a lot of documentation, and have suggested the use of interested parties. And so we are, in a lot of our regulatory filings and other things like that, including in the recent general rate case, we have moved away from using stakeholder to using interested parties. I think it's still a work in progress because there are still specific aspects of the law that use that term, and trying to be accurate. But I want to affirm the point that you're making, that and acknowledge that we're working on that within this space as well. So what's not mentioned here is CETA, the Climate Act, but that's a key part of how this all got started, us filing the CEIP and us sort of creating the EAG in 2021. And then moving forward across the page here, you have the general rate case and a number of regulatory proceedings where the commission sort of laid out their requirements for equity. At that point, we created an equity team at Puget, led by me. And we transitioned the EAG away from just focusing on CETA compliance and moving more broadly to look at equity work and requirements across the entire span of the utility. So that's a sense of how this has evolved. So for those of you who were there at the beginning, you had that experience, and then we're trying to transition to a broader view of this. Next bullet. So as you can see, the focus has started with CETA and CETA compliance, and then moving into meeting broader GRC and other regulatory requirements, and community engagement as part of procedural justice has become a key focus of the work that we do, as you all have experienced. Next part. Oh, and so in terms of the topics, as in the first year, a lot of the focus of this group was on the clean energy implementation plan. A lot of work on vulnerable population factors, customer benefit indicators. EAG was instrumental in working with us to develop a lot of those, and that went into that original CEIP. In 22, focus on updating some of the charters as the work evolved, CEIB updates, and then the important affordability work, the bill discount rate, that was one of those affordability programs, and the EAG was involved with the Low Income Advisory Committee on the informing how that program was designed. As we moved into the broader focus, we had a couple of equity forums that the EAG requested, and we worked to put together with them. And then looking at topics that came out of the GRC, delivery system planning, resource planning, a lot of assistance with different grants that we applied for, and then a lot of focus on deepest need and minimum designation, which continues to this day. And then a number of joint advisory group conversations around the minimum designation and deepest need with the LIAC and the CRAG. Moving on to 24, we had a third equity forum and a lot of conversations on distributed energy resource programs, solar, and net metering. Looking at equity and resource planning, focus on the ISP, the integrated system plan, assisting with grant processes, once again, including a large federal grant focusing on the Skagit area, and then a lot of work around distributional equity analysis. As we look to 25, we are exploring with Ishmael and his team, how do we improve the structure and governance of the organization of this group, I should say. Improve collaboration. So how do you work with each other, not just with us, and then your engagement with the broader communities that you represent, and then formatting our conversations in such a way that you can see and find ways to provide tangible impact of this work, within your communities. So we are discussing a retreat to sort of focus some time on some of those conversations. Next slide. So some of the specific things that we focused on and discussed, the solar buyback program, the residential batteries program, that program is still being designed, but there was some good feedback from the EAG that the team is including in that. Some of the Climate Commitment Act programs for low-income credits and the decarbonization programs, there was a lot of conversation about that and engagement that informed those programs. There's the results there for some of the impact to customers of that work. The Green Power Solar Grant, 14 projects that the EAG members reviewed were awarded. And then I mentioned the Skagit grant. That's a $45 million grant. Jenny made a point about changes at the federal government, but the previous administration had a heavy emphasis through the Justice 40 executive order that had a heavy focus on equity. And so, we were involved, the EAG was involved, and that we focused specifically on the Skagit River Valley area because we saw concentration of priority populations, which includes a lot of specific definitions, as Jenny mentioned, but the term we're using based on some sort of federal language is sort of priority populations. That grant has to be matched by Puget. So you're now talking about a $90 million investment in improving resiliency and reliability with a lot of really cool technology going into that area. Next slide. So once again, we are not planning and integrate and coordinating between the equity moments and what we're planning to cover, but serendipitously, it's always happened where there's a connection. And so here I'm looking at sort of communications and these are some of the ongoing conversations that we've been having with you and feedback and how we're sort of responding to those. So in the past, when we had questions that you asked us, we would provide you the answers to those when we provided the agenda and information for the next meeting. So you got that 3 days before the next meeting. Now we're striving to provide you with a response 5 to 7 days after the meeting while it's still fresh in your mind. We're tracking, we're documenting and then providing feedback on what we're hearing from you and how we're using that information to adjust and be more flexible in what we're doing. You are showing an interest and you express an interest in seeing topics that provide tangible customer impacts. That showed up when we were having the conversation about minimum designation and deepest need, and we're striving to incorporate that into what we do. And then create ways for you to communicate with each other. The Google groups were created to do that. And then we are looking to find other ways to encourage engagement so you can create community with each other and support each other as we move forward. Next slide. With meeting planning, we used to sort of have our steering committee meeting right before we finalized the presentations, and then you provided feedback at that point in time. Late last year, going into this year, we've transitioned to where we're trying to make sure that the steering committee looks a month ahead and starts working on the agenda and the content and all of that, so that there's plenty of time before we start finalizing what we're going to say for there to be input. So for instance, at the recent steering committee meeting, which I want to remind you that you're all welcome to participate in, that meeting, we discussed the February topics, not this one, because and we intentionally, because of the transition in the year, we chose topics that we felt wouldn't require a lot of change because they're ongoing. Like this is just an update and a projection into the future. And then the next topic is one that you've already participated in before. So it's an update around an engagement work that's happening. And then limiting the amount of topics so that we're trying to have no more than two, one mostly informed, the other one to allow you to engage, so that we are not feeling rushed and pressured. And as Jenny experienced, we're trying to make sure, even for the equity moment, that we give you guys space and time so it doesn't feel rushed. And then having input from the steering committee on different agendas that you'd like to hear from. We started that late last year, and made a bunch of changes on the fly. And we still have some folks who prepared for presentations last year, like around affordability, that we never got to just because we wanted to respond to what you wanted to prioritize. Next slide. And then hearing from the community, I think it's important. You want to be more involved in some of these programs. I think the equity forums that you got us going on provided a lot of good information and context for our engagement teams. And I am proud to say that our teams have stepped up their work within priority populations. And, I would love to have more of you be able to be involved when you're available in some of those. And it's really powerful and special to see the hundreds of families that have shown up to some of these events. Very, very inspiring. And so as part of this ongoing conversation, we're trying to figure out how to do that. Language accessibility continues to be an important thing for us. I should make a point here. I keep telling myself, and then I keep forgetting as I'm talking. A lot of what I'm projecting here into 25, some of it is covered in the recent general rate case order, and we're anticipating that there's now a much longer list of regulatory things that we need to engage with you on. So the challenge is going to be to figure out how to frame those in a way that allows for maximum engagement without sort of feeling like we're rushing and trying to get through too many things, because that's not worked. I mentioned that because one of the things is a language access plan. That is something we're going to be working on, and we'll want to make sure that you are engaged in that as well. We had the recent equity forum going forward, and as part of the retreat conversations and others, we're going to be, speaking with you, engaging around what are some of the best ways for us to have maximum connection between you and community, so that you can engage with the broadest and most diverse groups of individuals. And then sharing information from meetings. So we're going to create a way for you to take information that you're hearing from us and then more easily share it with your broader communities. Next slide. So this is just a way to sort of highlight at a high level how we're thinking about the coming year, well, the year that we're in. And we're trying to ground this in the language that comes from CETA and some of the other legislations. So that's why it says at least 30% of benefits to priority populations and maximizing investments to those customers who have the deepest need and those customers that are energy burdened, and their specific definitions around those. I think when we look at the numbers of customers that are energy burdened, even before the recent rate case, even before the clean energy transition, um, I think, and we had this come up at the recent steering committee meeting, but increasingly it's hard to avoid the fact that the impact of rates is probably um, the biggest equity issue, right? And for us to sort of think about that and wrestle with that and have conversations around that. And, CETA requires us to do that as well. So I think that's something we're trying to move more central to the things that we're doing. And then the clean energy investments, making sure that those and other programs like energy efficiency and other programs that we are making sure that 30+% of those investments are going into the priority populations as defined by the different statutes. So that's another thing. That's something we've been doing a lot of, but we need to continue that work. And then thinking about how we incorporate equity across a lot of our work, including a lot of the planning things, which aren't as tangible. But I think there's ways that we need to think about that. And we had a set of storms recently. How's our response when it comes to that? And there's some other conversations that came up as parts of the GRC that we're gonna, talk about as well. But that's just high level how we're thinking about that going forward. And this might inform how we bucket conversations so that we can have maximum impact and benefit through engagement without feeling like we're overwhelmed by too many different things and the complexity involved in our work. I think that's it for me. Is it one more? Okay, so then the look ahead, I think the way I'd frame those is improved structure and governance, so that you have a better understanding of what we do. But I'm not trying to get you to become knowledgeable and educated in what we do. I think we're trying to frame our work so that we can meet you where you are. And you can feel like you can comment and provide input and impact based on the knowledge that the lived experience and other knowledge that you come to us with, not requiring you to become more expert at what we do. And I think there's opportunities for us to do that as part of how we communicate with you. Strengthen collaboration, as I talked about, among each other, engagement with the broader community. We want to, we have a broad reach as an organization with such a large service territory. There are ways that we can help you grow your sort of network and impact within the community. And so that's something we're looking to do. And then this tangible impact piece, like I said, I am not going to expect you to become experts at what we do. I think the challenge for us is to simplify and focus what we do so that we can meet you where you are and you can then become more involved in the process. And the last bullet there, starting with when we were having the conversation about the CEIP targets and what that meant, and we were getting ready for that regulatory proceeding, there was some conversation there. We, as part of the recent general rate case, we got some feedback that, the commission staff and others would like to see, to have you hear your voice in some of those things. And so, once again, like I think the goal should be not to have you become experts in the utility work and in these regulatory proceedings. We provided you with a link and a summary for the GRC. That's going to be a topic of conversation in the February meeting. But if you go to that order, you will see that, a rate case is like a lawsuit, and it's 150 plus pages of legalese. So we need to work to make sure that we are framing all of that in a way that meets you where you are, and that you can feel empowered to provide feedback and input, and to confidently represent the communities that you serve. So with that, I will stop. Happy to take any questions or comments or feedback that you might have to anything that I just said before I hand it off to Andres. Okay. Thank you, Megan. Okay, so I'll hand it over to Andres. I will be here the rest of the meeting. So if you think of something, just go and pop it in the chat.
Thanks, Troy. Hello, everybody. My name is Andres Mantilla. I have the pleasure of working with the Uncommon Bridges team as part of the facilitation team, and have been following along the work that you've been doing for several months. And for, I think, several of you, this is the first time you have seen my face or heard from me. So good to meet you. Thanks for allowing me into this space. I wanted to reflect on a few things and just really build off of the last couple slides that Troy shared, in particular, the one about kind of coming to a vision or a proposed vision, and then this last slide around 2025 priority. Our team in general has worked a lot and is active actually with several similar advisory groups in the region, either advisory groups, sounding boards, feedback groups, and each of those are charged in different ways to work with governments and or institutions. They're community-based or community-focused and charged with bringing forward and representing community voice or community perspective to drive different policy or new policy or change approaches. And some of these examples that we're in active conversations right now with Seattle Public Utilities, with the state of Washington through some permanent supportive housing work, with King County and with the Port of Seattle. And I'd like to kind of offer, just as we move forward into 2025, some general observations around some common kind of themes and trends that we see with these groups, and talk really generally, and then get a little bit more specific as it relates to what we are doing in 2025, and perhaps some of the things that we can move forward to this retreat that we were talking about earlier. So from our perspective, the most successful groups or the most impactful groups are those that first and foremost, like Troy mentioned, individuals show up with clarity of who you are and who you're representing. That can mean where you are in your level of knowledge on the issue. This topic is super complex, and being able to kind of sit with that complexity while still being clear about the voices within your community, your neighborhood, your organization, your advocacy group, and who you're representing, and making sure that you're getting the information that you need to be clear about how you're bringing that information back. So groups that really think about this work in kind of iterative feedback loops, as we continue to kind of have and elevate voices of communities, are those that are most successful. Then it's being clear about the charge and the purpose. A lot of times, groups, advisory groups, spend a lot of time talking about really important issues, but those issues don't really fit within the charge of the group, and so it's a lot of really important conversation that then gets cut short because it's not connected to direct purpose. So what we really want to do is be really clear about the charge so that we can understand and set expectations around how we're going to actually move to fulfill that charge. We want to also understand the perspectives of other members. This group has a lot of good collaboration and community, and we talked about how words matter. Maybe we're using words a little bit differently, that we're defining in different ways. So we really want to understand when somebody says affordability, or somebody says equity, or somebody says accessibility. What is that perspective that they're bringing? How is that tied back to the representation that they are bringing into this group, so that we can know the community dynamic or the work dynamic that we're involved in. Groups that are successful organize using those conversations, organize under common core values, so that we then say, given those perspectives and given our opinions about things like climate and things like affordability, these are the core values that are representative of us. And those core values might change over time as the group changes or new members are appointed, but it provides that kind of North Star for the group. The next couple are, I think, really important, and I think move into maybe where we can head into 2025. And it's the realization that the work is complex, that climate work, community work, work that's involving governments and institutions is multi-layered, it's ongoing, it's continuous. And because of that, it's really important to have clarity around which issues and topics need what we call disproportionate priority. And that allows, by placing disproportionate priority, it allows us to say, these are the things that we, in 2025 or in this time period, want to put additional interest or disproportionate interest, resources, attention, because it's the most urgent, because it's the most impactful, or it's because the ones that we know that we can impact the most. The approach allows the group to be nimble, organized, to be responsive as things change, and to understand when new things come forward, to understand that maybe that's not a priority for this year. And although it's important, we're not going to kind of spend the time of the group addressing it. It doesn't diminish any other area of work that either PSE is doing or the EAG is doing, or in the cases of these other groups, what those governments and these groups are doing, but it allows an increased sense of clarity. It also allows us to build community, and what we see in the different groups allows to build a sense of community around among the members, and then allows for a kind of sense of history of impact. So you can say, well, in 2024, we were very clear about what our priorities were, and we accomplished these things. In 2023, we did these things. When everything is a priority in these groups, it's hard to understand kind of how you were measuring impact and which metrics were actually accomplished. And so what we've seen in kind of summary, and then I'll go into this slide here that you're looking at, is that by following this prioritization, we see groups that, or the result of the feedback that we're providing to the institution or the government, is much more nuanced. It's not just we want affordable rates or we want PSE to address this, but it's nuanced in the sense that it allows us to understand that the policy or the issue is complex, and it allows us to put forward feedback that's not as general, but it's more actionable, and it actually is connected potentially to a policy or programmatic change. And then finally, the groups, and I think this is really exciting for what we're going to see later today. The groups that kind of have mastered this in our experience then go beyond just having a conversation that's limited to topics or disproportionate priorities, but transition that to really help inform and form how that service is delivered. So it's an ability to support innovative engagement methods tailored to the needs of specific communities, interested parties, and drive intentional outcomes that are then tied back into the priorities that you've named. So as we kind of go into 2025, from our facilitator perspective, really, again, driving these three key points, identifying priorities and key issues to drive the group forward. We really feel that this question around where should we be spending a disproportionate amount of time helps us be focused. It helps you get the information that you want, that you need to be accountable or bringing back in that feedback loop that we've discussed. Number two, building robust consensus through a collaborative process. How are the priorities rising to the top within the group? Getting to know each other and what those core values are and how those are informing what you're moving forward. And getting the group to consensus and affirmation of purpose. How does PSE and the EAG align on purpose and the value of that partnership, not only as you are making recommendations on policy, but then as you're making recommendations on programs and approach to those programs. And so we really think that by following these three points here and addressing these 3 points, we're able to really be more targeted, nuanced in the feedback, and we see that successful groups in the region are able to organize in this way. So I'm really happy to take questions or just turn it over to Ishmael again. Thanks again for allowing me a few minutes to share my observations, and I'm sure we will be in continued contact.
I'll just pause. I mean, the whole sort of, and thank you, Andres, and thank you, Troy. This whole piece has been about all the work that you all already done and the foundation and structures that you already built to be able to move into this next year with like momentum, which I think is exciting, and hopefully you all feel that too. And if you're sitting there feeling like, well, this group could be better, that's part of what the opportunity here is. And I think it's that starting point, or for 2025's sake, is strong. Yeah. Yeah. Chris says, great 3 observations, base tenets for successful engagement, actual planning for both PSE and EAG. Yes. And I think you all see from Jenny's piece all the way through Andres's piece how this is about to play out in this program update that we're about to hear here. Oh, yes. Karia, go ahead. Yeah, thank you, Karia, for that. I think, so I'll say 2 things, and I'll say this, and then if other folks, either PSE, EAG, have anything they want to add on to that. I think one thing that's really important that a lot of members have flagged, and I think something that I've really taken away is that people are comfortable with, is the balance of what is the opportunity for EAG to drive on topics and discussion, and what are the things that the EAG has to be responsive to sort of regulatory requirements, et cetera. And so you make a great point, Kara, because there might be something that is a regulatory driven conversation, but like, actually, this is the thing we need to be talking about. Can we get to it later? And I think we do want to have that be a little bit more of the focal point, especially for folks that are in the steering committee. Will have seen sort of a calendar of topics, or that's probably familiar to many of you. Those calendar of topics, as Troy said, we're trying to have them be more focused, have them be more realistic about what's like possible to have in a productive meeting. But I think it makes sense for us to have that sort of parking lot and say it back to you all, at future meetings, and say, hey, this was a great point. It came up, we didn't get to it. And maybe when we can tie it back. So we're trying to do 2 things, Kari. We're trying to have the meetings not run out of time for those discussions, and yes, acknowledge when and how they might fit. But I appreciate you saying that. And if anyone else has reactions to that across the board, please.
Nothing to add. Well said.
Cool. Our big opportunity, I'm very excited about this, to really drive this change in the hands of the EAG is this retreat activity that we have been talking about and have been engaging you all on. And you will hear it many times between now and when it happens. You will receive a sort of very brief sort of schedule polling for us to finalize sort of logistics, date, location, but we are talking about an intensive opportunity for EAG members to collaborate on some of these pieces that Andres was talking about and some of the pieces that Troy was talking about. The clarity of our purpose, the relationship building of how can I better know who is my peer in this group, how does it tie to what we're working on this year, and what are the things that we're trying to accomplish by way of our work and our broader engagement. And so you will hear more about the planning of that over the next little while, but the ideal is that as many people as possible will be able to be there so that we can make the most of that space. So that's my brief plug for that, and you'll hear it multiple times. Okay, we are at our break, so let's take this says 5, so it's like 6:08. Let's call it like 6:10. And we'll return back. If you're able to, get some water, stretch, use the restroom, and we'll be back at 6:10 to move into the next part of the meeting. Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna start to come back. You can hear my voice. We're gonna start to get back into the second half of the meeting. If you're around and able to have your camera on, that is great. Appreciate you for that. If you need to be camera off for some reason, let me know you're here some other way. Thank you, Monica. Use the chat, use an emoji, flash your face, say hi. Great. Okay, thank you. I hope you stepped away or moved away from your, thanks for the acknowledgements, from your computer in that short time. I am grateful for maybe the like overstock of Ferrero Rocher that our office has since the holidays. So it was like 6:10. I know where I'm going. So just a couple of those and good little walk and stretch, and now I'm ready. So let's see. Yeah. Oh, welcome, C. Yeah, you're good. No need to apologize. You had obligations at school. No worries at all. Glad you're here to make it for the second half of the meeting. So, great. We are moving on. We've been sort of teeing this up a little bit earlier in the meeting. We are going to hear about a sort of program, or specifically a pilot and update, which I think that the last time that the EAG heard about this was quite some time ago. So there will be a little bit of recap. But my sort of tee up as I turn this over to both Ray and Virginia is that while this is an update on a specific pilot, and there is a little bit here of, reflections on how this is going, really, this is an example that we want to turn into a discussion about opportunities for more equitable, transformative, sort of catalytic engagement. And there is a really wonderful sort of example and precedent that PSE has been able to really dive in with this DER empowerment pilot. So we're going to learn a little bit, or remind ourselves, refresh on the pilot, how the progress and how it's been going, and then talk a little bit among us around what are we pulling from that might inform PSE broadly, or EAG broadly's future work on engagement. And this too will be something, that piece, that we can talk about at the retreat. So I will turn it over. I see Ray is off mute, so I think I'm turning it over to you, Ray. Let me know when you want me to advance slides.
Yeah, thanks, Ishmael. Thanks for having us. It's good to see some familiar faces and some new faces. For those of you that don't know me, Ray Outlaw, you can read my title on the screen. I supported the EAG in a similar way to Yvonne and Lysa a couple of years ago, before transition to the energy equity team. And Virginia is with me. Some of you, I think, have met Virginia too some time ago. she and I have been working on this project together, so we'll both be here to answer questions. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about what we're trying to do. We talked to the EAG about the DER empowerment pilot, that's distributed energy resources, and we'll define that on screen for you here in a couple of slides. We talked to you back in February of last year, so almost a year ago, to get your ideas on how to deliver this work, what empowerment looked like, et cetera, and got some really great feedback. So tonight we want to kind of share with you where we're at, where we've gone with this work. We're not done yet. And revisit the approach, because we feel the need, based on feedback from the customers that we're talking to, that we need to take a slightly different angle on what we're trying to do. And then, as they just noted, kind of connect this work to the larger work at PSE. So I'll leave that to the team to talk about that piece, Ishmael and the team, at the end. Next slide, please. Okay, so background first, what is the DER empowerment pilot? I won't read all the words on the screen, but essentially in our order approving the original CEIP, the 2021 Clean Energy Implementation Plan, we had a number of conditions. I want to say it was 27, but it might have been 30. Essentially, though, there were a list of conditions that we had to comply with, and one of them was this DER pilot. And it said that we need to pilot an approach to engaging customers in named communities at the empowerment level of the International Association of Public Participation Spectrum. So IAP2, for short, is an international organization that provides a lot of guidance on public participation approaches. They have something called the spectrum, which ranges from inform on the left to empower on the right. And the farther you go to the right, the greater the level of influence the people you're engaging have over the decision, with empowerment meaning they essentially make the decision. At the end, there was also this requirement that we collaborate with the AG on the approach, and interested persons, which we have done, on the approach to this work. Next slide, please. So a little more background. What are DERs, or distributed energy resources? They include, for the purposes of this work, solar. This is primarily in the form of rooftop solar, battery storage, like batteries installed in your home, demand response. So you adjust your thermostat, don't wash some laundry, don't run the dishwasher during specific times of day to reduce energy consumption at peak times, and energy efficiency, LED light bulbs, home insulation, any kind of conversion from higher electric use products to lower electric use products, like a energy efficient refrigerator, a washer dryer, etc. So all of these make up the umbrella of DERs, which in summary are things that customers can do on their side of the meter, right? So after the meter into your home or residence or business, things you can do to either reduce, produce, or store energy to support your needs and perhaps the needs of the entire electric system, depending on which category you're working in. Thank you for reading my mind. And also, if you have any questions along the way, please don't hesitate. I'm happy to answer them as we go, so you don't have to remember, oh, back on slide 26. So as we went into the pilot, as I mentioned, we filed our CEIP in 2021. It took more than a year to get approval. So now we're into 2023. And in the meantime, a lot of work was happening at PSE. And it became obvious in this work that we couldn't ignore all of that past and work that was occurring in real time. So from 2022 to now, we have a program enrollment campaign to enroll customers in named communities and customers throughout our service territory in various programs. In 2023 and 2024, we had a solar and battery program design engagement. And you'll note the involve, collaborate, at the end in parentheses. Those are the IAP2 levels that we're working at, roughly in those projects. And in 2024, we also had a pretty substantial engagement process on our biennial CEIP update. So this was a document that we filed in 2023 that updated our 2021 CEIP. And then in 2023, we implemented what we call the Customer Education and Awareness Program. Many of you have talked to the CCEAP at times from the EAG, so they've been in operation for quite some time. And lastly, over the last year, our energy efficiency team has been working on a small change, big impact campaign or program to drive, as you might assume from the title, small changes in your personal habits can result in a big impact in customer bill savings. So in the time between we filed the CEIP, the order came out, and then we began the DER pilot work, a lot has happened at PSE, which really influenced the path that we were taking in this work on the pilot. Next slide, please. So back in February, we came to the AG. You saw many of the slides I've already gone through tonight. And we asked you for your thoughts on how should we do this? What should a DER empowerment look like? And we heard a lot of ideas and thoughts from you, including that we really needed to make these meetings, I shouldn't say meetings because we weren't set on meetings yet. We needed to make this engagement exercise very accessible, much more accessible than we would normally do or historically have done in our work here at PSE. We needed to really focus on a customer-centric program design approach. So really allowing customers to influence how we design not just the programs, but the work itself. And that this work should really be about capacity building. And one of the parties that helped write that condition in the order, we met with her early in this work, and she said, you know, all the language says empower customers in DER programs. She said it really could be any type of program. It doesn't necessarily have to be DER programs. The importance here is that we're empowering communities and empowering individuals. And so we really took that to heart in the sense that the DER part of the condition is really important, but we're really focused on what does empowerment look like? What does it feel like in these communities? And the photo on the right is just some notes from one of the meetings we have been hosting, which we'll talk a little bit more about in the upcoming slides. So next slide, please. Okay, I think this is our last reminder, but when we met with you last year, we had an idea of what success looked like. And it was that we would work with customers in named communities, empower them to design and choose a new or modified DER program that would then go to the UTC for approval. And I remember so distinctly, Dennis and his ability to tell the future, he said, well, what if they don't all come up with the same program? And I remember saying, you know, that's definitely a possibility, and we're going to have to wrestle with that when we get there. Spoiler alert, that's exactly what happened. But we'll get to that in a minute. We also wanted to make sure that customers truly feel empowered in this process, and that the program that we designed ultimately addresses some real need articulated by customers. And then additionally, secondarily, we wanted to really strengthen relationships in these communities and enhance customer capability and capacity to really engage in our programs and services. Next slide, please. All right, so what do we do? We started very slowly by going to some community-based organizations that us and our colleagues at PSE had good relationships with. Our assumption was that this would take time, that we needed to have some trust to begin with, because in order to go from I don't know about programs to designing a program is a pretty big jump. For those of you that have been on the EAG for a while, and Ishmael and Troy talked about earlier, a lot of this is really complex. So how do we bring people from point 0 to point 10 or whatever the case might be? So we started with Bremerton at the NAACP, where PSE partnered on one of your equity forums, and they helped us form a group of primarily historically marginalized customers in the region. And that started with a couple of information sessions and then evolved into a series of meetings. And that group really helped us create the template for what we might want to do going forward. And they asked us too, can we do these in a hybrid format? Because not everyone could make it on the same night, the same day. And we said, sure. And so those meetings occur in a tiny little room at the YWCA there in Bremerton. We'll have a dozen or so people in the room and another handful of people on a Zoom call. And it's not nearly as polished as this experience we have here because it is hybrid and our consultant team is kind of walking around with a handheld camera. But it works for that group and it's really exciting to see. From there, we took that model and we went to another close connection communities and schools up in Burlington. And they helped us form our first Spanish speaking group, excuse me. And so this group is primarily farm workers in the Skagit area. And it is entirely in Spanish. I or Virginia attend, but our facilitator and our PSE team that speaks Spanish fluently, they lead those meetings completely. And we'll show you some photos throughout, but this has been a really, I think, exciting opportunity for us because it requires me and my team to kind of let go of some responsibility and place that trust in the team. But the group there has been really responsive and really engaged. There's a photo later where you see some folks writing on the wall, and this occurs every single meeting. We put up flip charts on the wall, and it's 25 minutes after the meeting is over, and they're still writing ideas on the wall and hanging out and talking and having a really good time. One of the thoughts we've heard from that community is that they're really grateful, not just for this experience, but for the opportunity to meet folks in their community that they hadn't actually spoken with or engaged with before. So that's been a really cool side product that we really didn't imagine. Moving on, we went to the Suquamish tribe, and we were fortunate enough to connect with their climate adaptation group, who helped us put together a small group of tribal members in the area. And they've also, just at the last meeting, asked us to do this in a hybrid fashion instead of in person. So we have been, and we're meeting at their tribal youth center, which has been really cool. So we've had some staff from the tribal youth center who are quite youthful themselves, as well as some youth even wander in from time to time and participate in a little conversation here, a little conversation there. This was the first group that said to us, I don't know, you guys have a lot of programs. Maybe we need to talk about why I don't know a lot about these programs as opposed to needing new programs. So first little clue that we might need to shift our direction. Finally, we went to Kent. And so the Kent group actually is a spinoff of some work that the Customer Education Awareness Program was doing. They were recruiting for a short-term advisory group. They selected their group and had another set of really great candidates, but just not enough room for them. So we were able to reach out to this group and say, hey, I know you're not doing this other work, but we'd love to have your help in this empowerment pilot. Would you be willing to do a group with us? And so they did. They preferred a virtual space, just general preference. So we've been meeting virtually with them. So we've got 2 hybrid, we've got 1 in person, and we have 1 virtual space, which has really been cool for us. So again, we're trying to do as much as we can in a pilot. So very different audiences, very different demographics, different types and formats for meetings. The one thing I would say for the in-person meetings is they always include food, an actual meal, not just cookies and water on the table. And the meetings start that way. We all sit down and we have a meal together. And I think that has also been really impactful in building some trust and relationship and some community, not just amongst themselves, but with PSE as well. Lastly, everyone that participated is also compensated through a gift card program that we're doing. So these are compensated events. And even in doing that, this type of a commitment has been it's sometimes challenging because it's just a lot of time and energy. Next slide, please. So one of my personal lessons from my time in the EAG, working with the EAG, was meet people where they are doesn't just mean going to their community. It means meeting them in ways that are meaningful and real to them. It means hosting a whole series of meetings in Spanish, not translated, not me standing up front and translating it and someone translating to Spanish, but actually someone speaking to them in Spanish in real time. And so we really have taken that to heart. It has been the core focus of all of our work here to make these spaces as accessible and friendly and welcome as possible. In the Burlington group, there are kids at every meeting. They run around, they make noise, they bang on things. Sometimes they go out in the library and hang out with Virginia or Will or someone else. Other times they're watching an iPad. And we've tried to make it really clear that that's okay, as long as the group individually or individuals can function well, and my kid's not a distraction for you doing your exercise, then that's great. Let them be here. Let them see this, even peripherally experience how this is working. We had a member asked us, hey, could you help me with some transportation? He's a gentleman that didn't want to drive late in the wintertime as the days got shorter. So we've arranged for Uber to get him to and from meetings. And also added the virtual option. Again, the childcare, we're hosting, one of these is in the Skagit Library or Burlington Library. And the library's been really graceful in letting us, we have a room reserved, but we kind of use the whole space and it's fine. And then again, meals are always provided. Next slide, please. So again, this is the small meeting space in the YWCA. A quote there about this has been fun and educational. It's been really important that we personalize the message, that we speak to folks without a lot of acronyms, and take our time getting through this process. What we heard early on is these are some really cool programs and we didn't know they existed. So we're trying to tease out, well, why is that the case? What do we need to do differently? In doing so, we've collaborated with our outreach teams. Again, I think you've met Melissa Troy on a couple of occasions. Her team does county level or region level engagement plans every year. So in the last couple of meetings, or the last meeting, we brought the engagement team, the outreach team, to each of the meetings and actually asked the groups, well, what should we be thinking about for 2025? How can we do our engagement plans differently? And then transparency and responsiveness has been super important. Again, when someone needed a ride, we made it happen. When we need to adjust schedules, we were very clear and transparent about, hey, we had one group kind of move really quickly and we needed to slow down the Bremerton group because the others needed to catch up a little bit. And we've just been honest about that. And again, it's gone really well. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? We had information sessions early on, and then we progressed through a series of meetings. So first, what are DERs? And really diving into what is customer solar, what is customer battery, what is energy efficiency demand response. Then we did what's called an empathy exercise in the community challenges space. So we asked the groups to think about specific customer types within their region. And a lot of them centered on renters or mobile home residents or both, primarily low income. And we asked them to think about, well, just put your imagination hat on for a minute. Imagine you're in this customer group. What is that experience like for a customer? And that was really, I think, impactful for us and for them to start to think not just through their own eyes, but through the lens of someone else's eyes. From there, we went to, okay, well, let's think about what type of DER program do you think we need to build or design? And this is when we got into the space of, I don't know that you need new programs. You've got 120 plus. Maybe new is not the answer. And this is where that slide early on where I talked about all the work that had kind of happened in the interim. You all have met Mackenzie. She runs the community solar, or community Green Power Solar Grant program. Many of you have scored projects in that program. Thank you. Her team had done an extensive DER engagement project in named communities in 23 and 24. And there are multiple new programs that are in the field today or on their way out to the field right now, including income eligible batteries, income eligible solar, et cetera. So we have a pretty good portfolio of projects, of programs. So we started to rethink, well, maybe we need a slightly different approach. In Suquamish, though, an even more interesting example is they said to us, hey, we want to go slower. We don't want to go every 2 weeks and just fly through this work. We want to spend time with you and really understand what we're trying to accomplish. So that's another opportunity for us to say, hey, like your empowerment is letting them drive the bus to the maximum degree possible, right? So Suquamish, we're slowing down. We're going to just meet with them less frequently and follow that where they want to take it. Next slide, please. Okay, so after meeting 3, we kind of got to this point where we've got to decide where we're going. It's a pilot. We were only planning about 6 meetings or so with each of the groups. And this is really where it kind of came to us that it's time to adjust the approach. So folks were asking questions like you see in the box, where are the community solar projects, or the number of programs is overwhelming. Is there a better way for them to be organized? We had ideas like, well, can I just like go on the website and say, I live in an apartment and my income is X, and you can spit out the programs that apply for me, right? That would apply to me. So that was just before the Christmas holidays and New Year's holidays, we had those meetings, and we had a chance to kind of take a break, reset, and identify our path forward. Next slide, please. Okay, I've already talked about a lot of this, and I know we're running a little short on time. But so part 1, first slide, that's that empathy exercise. We asked people to really think about a specific user case. What do they say? What do they think? What do they do? What do they feel? And then in the next phase, we had the DER programs across the top, solar batteries, energy efficiency, demand response. And then the left column, up and down, were the different types of users. So low-income renter, mobile home resident, single mom, large family, right? Those kind of ideas. And what we tried to do is identify how the scale of programs with each of those buckets, right? So we have a lot of energy efficiency programs across almost every customer type. We don't have a lot of demand response programs, but they fit a lot of different customer types. Solar and battery, especially batteries, are more limited. And so in part 3, which is the part we're in right now and heading towards closure of this pilot, we really think we want to enhance our customers' ability to access DER programs. And in doing so, we empower not just these group of 40 to 50 or 60 people that we're working with, but a much larger group of customers to really feel empowered to make clean energy choices on their own. And so that is generally the direction we're headed. I would say we've heard overwhelmingly that there's a need to focus on affordability and accessibility, 2 words that I know are very familiar to the EAG. I think from day 1, we've heard from these groups that cost is everything. And so many of them love the idea of solar on their roof or batteries connected to their home, but also realize that without massive incentives, those programs are just not possible for a lot of folks. And even with incentives, not possible for folks who live in mobile homes or rent apartments or whatever the case might be. Although I will say multi-tenant solar is around the corner. I just talked to Mackenzie the other day, and that one is on the way. So that's solar designed for apartments. The other thing I'll say too is we are recognizing that our groups are small. We have 50 or 60 people. We can't extrapolate their experiences across all of our customers. But what we can do is realize this is a much deeper, much richer engagement than I've had the privilege of being part of. It's some of the most it's some of the coolest work I've been able to do in my 20-ish year career. So I'm really excited about it. And we can use those lessons learned, and we can pull the ideas and the anecdotes and share them with our teams, and also hear what our other teams are learning. As I said, McKinsey did similar work, not quote unquote empowerment, but similar work with hundreds of customers as well. So there are themes we can see across our portfolio of engagement activities. Next slide, please. Okay. I think Ishmael, you're going to take this slide, but let me just, I'll take the green box on the right really quick, and then we can talk about these questions. But again, we want programs that address a very real need that's articulated by our customers. And I would say the need we've heard is low cost, no cost. What can I do today, tomorrow to save money? And so we're listening. We want to strengthen community connections. And I think we have done that honestly really well. I'm really, really proud of this team and the work they've done. This opportunity has been really cool. And I will say, much like I said, the group would stay late and hang out and write notes on the wall. We're hearing they don't want it to end, right? We've said, well, we're only going to do about 6 meetings. And they're like, well, can we do 7 or can we do 8? So that's a clue that we're doing something right. I do think we have empowered customers and in communities. We're not done yet. We're going to keep empowering them, but we have followed their lead. When they said, let's do something different, let's take a different approach, let's take a look at this through a different lens, we have listened and we're doing that. And again, at the end, where I hope this work takes us is not just for these customers, but for a much larger group of customers that are similar to them, that they feel much more empowered to make choices about their energy use, whether it be signing up for a program. There's lots of interest in demand response, but I was just talking with Juan, our outreach lead up in Skagit, and he said, you know, folks will use demand response, but first they have to have a MyPSE account, and to have a MyPSE account, they have to have an email address, and so there's this, like, we got to work backwards and help them even get to that place. And my first thought was, well, why can't we use their phone number instead of an email address to sign up for a MyPSE account? Those are the kinds of things we're going to try to uncover in the next couple of meetings. So in the end, we have, from each group, we have a list of ideas of things we can improve. And we'll get them to help us prioritize that list, so then we can move those, as many of them as possible, into actionable steps. Okay, Ishmael, I think I'm done. I'm going to pause and see if we have questions.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ray. I'll just say very quickly, and then there's questions on the slide and in the chat. When preparing for this meeting, you'll see that there isn't a question that is, what do you think, or how can this program or pilot be improved, changed, etc. And that is intentional because it is an empowerment pilot where the participants of this program and this pilot are the drivers. And so that's where that feedback is going to be respected and is going to be honored. And so instead, we want to talk a little bit and hear from the group around what did you hear from Ray in this example that resonates with you sitting here as an EAG member, thinking about other work that PSE has brought forward. One thing that Ray mentioned earlier, the opportunity for something like what we might call empowerment might not always be available to us. And so there are reasons and choices as to why we have certain engagement approaches. But I think what we want to hear from you all is, as you hear and have processed what Ray is saying, are there things here that from the engagement pilot that represent an approach that you hope to see in PSE's work moving forward? Why or why not? Or when would it work and when would it might not work? And how can PSE build the successes from this pilot? Again, it is a pilot at the end of the day, which means that it is not necessarily a guaranteed long-standing opportunity, but that can continue with work moving forward. And we want to start this conversation today and hopefully continue to be able to have conversation as we are reframing our engagement opportunity. So a lot of love in the chat, which is great. And I know that PSE folks are really proud of this work. And so, yeah, so we want to respect and honor the work. We're not going to modify it, but we're going to ask ourselves, when might an opportunity like this make sense for us, or what resonated from what was presented in this pilot? So I invite folks to share and help us understand a little bit where we can continue to orient ourselves in PSE's increasingly equitable engagement work.
I expect we'll have a few more of similar comments based on the chat, but I did want to bring up Karia's question about the kind of educational materials that you shared during the sessions, and if you could tell us a little about them.
Yeah, thank you. Great question, Karia. Really quick, Chris, just back to your comment. I want to say too, the team that's helping us with is Ma Foster, so Will and Seth, folks, names that many of you know. I would say I don't know that we could have done this work in the way that we did it without the years of experience working with the EAT2. We've learned a lot, and I mentioned some of those things along the way, but I think there's also just intangibles that we pick up through conversations with you, through equity moments, and that have been incredibly valuable. So kudos to all of you for sharing all the things that you have. In terms of what we shared, most of this is done via PowerPoint slides, but for most of the groups, we print the slides and we hand them out in advance. And again, in the Spanish speaking group, that is all completely in Spanish, translated by our consultants. And I go to the meetings, I understand a few, like every seventh word, but I don't speak Spanish. And the meetings just go, and it's fantastic. We haven't done a lot of handheld materials, although we may get there, especially as we get to the end of this and we figure out where customers are, where they're most interested. For example, up in Skagit, one would like to do a demand response enrollment night, where not just our group that's been coming regularly, but they can invite their friends and colleagues and coworkers and say, hey, come on in and sign up for demand response, because you can get I think it's a $50, $25 bill credit immediately, and then periodic bill credits over time. So yes, sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but similar sessions in language.
I can help
think
you with
that's
the chat
definitely
too,
a lesson
Ray.
learned. Yeah, thank you.
No worries. I think that the next question was specifically about other languages in priority communities, other, including Spanish, that this type of activity would work for, as far as like translation, and maybe talk a little bit about if that's a barrier or if that's an opportunity as far as working with language translation folks.
Yeah, Ariam, this probably sounds like a no-brainer, but I do think one of the biggest barriers to this was to show up in Spanish from the very first moment, right? It's not an English meeting with translations. We're hosting a meeting for you in Spanish. And so I think we can offer translations. We do that in other spaces, but I think in order for this to work, you got to start right there in the language that community speaks. And so I do know that the CCEAP, Customer Education Awareness Program, they are doing / planning some work in other languages. We've gotten some feedback about ways we can improve our website translations through the Kent group in particular. And as I think Troy mentioned it earlier, but through the general rate case, we also have a new ask that we create a language plan for PSE. So I think there are a lot of opportunities going forward to do more things in languages other than English.
And just to kind of put a finer point on that, I think we talked a lot about language accessibility all the time, and including kind of some of the equity forum conversations we had last year, and looking at how activities like this, particularly to I think who's TJ's comment about how folks come together, you created community, you created a place people want to be and want to stay because they want to continue that engagement. What does a long-term kind of relationship or engagement with community look like? And particularly for the EAG and as people, you know, this program, this pilot ends, but like there are people in your community who are connected to PSE, to the work they are doing. How are you creating and how can we enhance those connections and utilize EAG members, for example, as an opportunity to keep people involved or to like keep feeling connected? So I think that was a really interesting point, TJ. Dennis has his hand up, Ray. If you have a response to that, and then I'll go to Dennis.
Yeah, Ariam, I can just touch on that. I think one thing we've been able to do, and we're trying to do by bringing in the outreach team and other staff at PSE. So Virginia and I, we don't live and work in all of these communities day to day, right? And the outreach team does. They are assigned to specific counties, and so in some cases, those folks have helped us form the groups because they had existing relationships. In other cases, they've come in after the group was formed, and so at some point we're going to sort of hand off the relationship to them, but we need to hold on to contact and hold on to that relationship. You know, if we get a list of 15, 20 recommendations, some of them, maybe a lot of them will take time. And we need a way to get back to that group and say, you remember that thing you told us we should do? Well, here's what it looks like today. We've got to hold on to that and make sure that we're accountable to them and showing that we didn't just come in, grab some information and then disappear.
Dennis, please, if you'd like to come up here.
Sure. You know, I've known Ray for a number of years here through the EAG, and I just have to say that this really is coming full circle from the initial conversations we had with the EAG and Ray and his team. You know, and you start with a focused offering with a DER, and I saw four things that came from it. You know, you focused on a priority population. You established solid communications. You established trust, and then you focused on actionable goals as a fourth item. And like I said, it's amazing. You know, listening to Ray talk about these very specific approaches, and I know that all the things we talked about in, you know, almost 4 years ago really have kind of, you know, you can see where they're actually starting to bear some fruit. And it's very encouraging to see that. And yeah, Ray, you guys have done an awesome job. Absolutely awesome. You've adjusted to the needs of the different communities because each of them acts differently. They have different needs. They are different people. And it very encouraging. Outstanding. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Jamika.
Yes.
Kimiko.
Yeah, we're really hoping that you're taking all of this in this feeling you have right now about how great this work is as we talk about those priorities, strategic priorities that the EAG has, and how the EAG can and has an opportunity to communicate to each other, to the public, to PSE, and relay messages back and forth in the way that it might look and the way that it might happen, as well as how can EAG members really support the ongoing work of the PSE engagement team, because clearly like there's really great work going on. And so where's that synergy? Where's that support, to D'Amico's point? Where's those boots on the ground? I think those are all great conversations we hope to have at our upcoming retreat and really codify and build consensus around together.
and I'll just underscore too that I heard, and I see a piece here from Monica. I heard many times from Ray, Virginia in the chat, that the success of this pilot was there was a real influence of this group's conversations and learnings from, I saw Virginia talking about the equity forum. And so it's not just the when PSE comes, it brings a topic, feedback, thank you, move forward, but sort of the experience of being close to the EAG is helping to move PSE in a direction that is closer to a ideal of doing equitable, responsive community engagement work. And so as we have these questions up, which again, this is for today, but it's also us moving forward, is essentially where those other opportunities lie, and helping this group continue to see its role as being that, you know, you've helped make PSE better and sharper by existing and showing up authentically in this space. Monica asked, is there any world where the equity forums in these groups meet? Oh, Ariam, you can just, you taped it out fast. Go.
I'm sorry. I was just typing about how I think that's exactly kind of the types of questions we want to imagine as we reimagine, like, what is the most effective way for EAG members to achieve their mission of reaching named communities and being a conduit. I think we've talked about how potentially maybe smaller, more decentralized ways of doing that work in community, going to organizations, having one-on-one relationships might suit things better. And then being an opportunity for opportunities like this, where EAG members can collaborate with existing PSE outreach engagements, so that there is that synergy created. So to that point, saying that I absolutely think they're related. I don't know if my question being like, do we have to duplicate to if we feel like the same value is getting created? And how can we collaborate and create synergy rather than duplication? And so I think a lot of these questions are things that we're going to touch on in the next month and in the retreat. Oh,
I'll just, I see Megan's question and it says, don't have time to address tonight. So I'll read the question, and then I want to ask Ariam, if I know that you've been taking a look on the
So I can
live stream.
answer.
Yeah, okay.
I can
Go
answer,
ahead,
Ishmael.
Troy.
The answer is no.
Ariam, have you seen anything by way of public comment request?
We do not have any public comment requests.
So Ishmael, I know we've got like less than a minute left, but I just wanted to, in the spirit of Megan's question, I just want to make a couple of points before we end the call and tie things back. So earlier with the equity moment, you know, we talked about this idea of not using language that sort of disadvantages folks, right? And one of the things that we presented in our GRC was this idea of looking at all of these communities where we have concentrations of priority populations, and for our internal team, calling them equity investment zones, and then focusing on building relationships that would then allow us to continue to do work and have the work evolve, instead of trying to sort of every time we have a conversation, we start a new meeting and start a new engagement. If you notice in Ray's presentation, the places where we went were places where we already had relationships, which allowed us to then leverage this work and move forward, you know, at a quicker pace than we otherwise would have. And so, you know, to TJ's point, we're going to continue to have those conversations going forward, have those relationships, whether it's about the specific topics here or with these specific groups. This is about maintaining those relationships in the communities. And so, Megan, everything we're doing here is based on what's required and what we're empowered to do in our state. The impact will be on federal programs, like you saw with the Skagit Grant and Justice 40 and some of those other things. But we expect to be able to continue to do the work that we're doing and continue to evolve these relationships. So thanks, Ishmael.
Absolutely. No, thank you for responding to that, Megan. I appreciate you with your sort of honesty and vulnerability of like, I'm not feeling great about that. I'm feeling a little uneasy. So I appreciate you bringing that too. Okay, well, thank you all. It sounds like we didn't have requests from public comment. There's a separate wave that we're also seeing where people are making public comment requests. So we're watching two screens to bring it into this space. We're past time. Thank you. This was great. Hopefully energizing as we go into the rest of this year. And yes, steering committee meeting on February 3rd. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next AG meeting. Thank you.